Hello, Paul, and welcome back, Karen. Another fascinating week in our American lives in 2026. But Karen, thank you for being back here again. I know my sister, our cousin, your cousin, my sister Bonnie, was very excited to hear Karen being back again. She really enjoyed our
Oh, geez.
episode, so I'm sure she's not the only one.
Yeah,
So
and
thank you
I
very
thought I was
much.
texting you, Karen, that my son Thaddeus wants to hear more about your story. You know,
Oh,
you know,
geez.
yeah.
Okay.
So you're the poignant guest on the show now. You've taken away the mojo from Greg and I.
Yeah, exactly.
To do that.
Exactly. So actually, yeah, it's funny. I actually looking at the last one in between. It was almost like a little angrier version of everything. I think Karen kind of gives us some levity and all. So great to have you back here, Karen. It doesn't fit in with our dignity episode at the beginning, but
Our dignity index. Yep.
exactly. So the good news for Paul and I anyway, and Karen, and well, we've talked a little about the social impacts of it, was having a lot of fun for two Celtics fans with the Knicks. And I was in the city, like I said, on Friday night, and it was electric. But Paul, I don't know how it is watching from afar there, but it's a pretty fascinating week, I think, in NBA and New York history, watching how this thing is going down. So.
I think one thing you can say about this is that the experts aren't very expert. I
Yeah.
mean, who would have picked the? You think of everything, and who would have picked the Knicks 1, 2, 3 months ago? Just no way. And even after I was doing my workout in the morning, the day after Game One, and they were all just still were. They are not drinking the Kool Aid whatsoever. I think I don't know. You do remember years ago when Moses Malone was playing center for the 76er, and
Yep.
this was when the series were the playoffs were different, but he predicted that, and after before the first round he said 4-4-4, and people
Yeah.
thought he was crazy, and they did. They went
Yeah.
four
I remember
straight,
he
12
was a
games.
beast against the Celtics. I remember that he was
Yeah,
give
and
us
the
all some
Knicks are doing the
scrub.
same thing, so it's kind of interesting to well, and there's been runs, and I mean it was a 1 point game, but ultimately, they're just controlling the game. Towns was just saying, "Hey, we get ahead, and they're just controlling the games for the most
Well,
part." You
they're
and I were
beating the
texting
crap out of
back and
Wemby here,
forth,
Robert.
pretty physical stuff. They're really letting them play. I think almost to their demise. So we'll see how they adjust tomorrow
Yeah,
night.
no, definitely. I think I loved that Brunson won't he didn't want to be in the room with the Larry O'Brien trophy. I love that. He'll see it when he
Yeah,
wins it, right? So I
yeah.
love that. I think there's a lot of posing in the NBA, and this does not seem like. And again, I think that again, especially from someone who usually won't root for New York teams, these are just two very likable teams. I think
Right.
even the Spurs to a certain extent, they're going to be there for a long time with that kid, but they're just likable teams. And I usually am kind of person. I like my team. I love my team. I hate everybody else. So
Right.
pretty high praise for you. So, but we were talking a little earlier, and I was saying that it feels like it's a rebirth for the city. I think there was that quote that's been making the rounds. My mirror is Muslim, my bagels are Jewish. Christian Dior, Nixon 4. But it feels like, and like I said, I was in Lower Manhattan 9/11, and it feels like, literally for the first time in 25 years, New York has fully got its mojo back. And, Karen, I know, we talk about, the impacts of 9/11, COVID, all that stuff. But, it's been pretty interesting to watch. I'm sure, Paul and I pray a little more into it, but in terms of, what has been sort of your, if you've seen anything that from any of this in the sports world, and Trump's going to be there tomorrow night, that's kind of hit on your radar screen, Facebook or otherwise, or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, once the New England teams are out, I don't pay that much attention, honestly.
And that's
And
typically us.
yeah, yeah. So, I haven't heard too much about it. My boys talk about sports kind of in general. But yeah, no, Trump coming in to New York for the game has been kind of all over my social media feed. And, it's just another example of him sucking the life out of things that have nothing to do with him.
Exactly.
And I feel bad for the people who, again, knowing that the Knicks have had this really long drought, and them being in the championship is, really, again, being a New England sports fan, it's a big deal when you have a big drought and then all of a sudden, you're there. And for someone else, but particularly this individual, to suck the life out of that, it just, it sucks.
Yeah, you're right. Imagine if he showed up in 2004 for the clinching game or something when the Red Sox won the World Series. It would have been.
Yeah.
We already had Jimmy Fallon and Drew Barrymore filming a movie there. I guess we didn't even know about it. They were filming that movie during that
Right.
game. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's crazy. But and I do think it's part of larger picture we're seeing with again his disruptions. I don't know if you guys caught the Meet the Press this morning. I caught a good chunk of that. That was pretty fascinating. Him and Christian Welker.
Mhm.
First of all, he looked. I mean, again,
He looked horrific. I just saw the clip
just
and
looked out of
it was,
control. Yeah,
yeah, it was. He's off the rails. And I think
yeah,
Karen brought up another thing, probably just by happenstance, but it's just like if you pivot to the 250th, anniversary, it's just it truly is sucking the life out of it. This is going to be just a very disappointing experience. I think I was a sophomore in high school, maybe, some right around there, for the
probably. Yeah.
200th anniversary, and a lot was going on. We were recovering from Watergate, and Ford was trying to bring the country together. So it was definitely a different time, but I don't see anything that's really kind of any type of uniting, or it's just Karen just said it best. It's just sucking the life out of. Here is the 250th anniversary. We can have our disagreements, but it should be something that we can rally around. And you know, it's
Yeah. And you think about the celebrations and things that were supposed to happen. People have probably been spending years working on this stuff. This is
right,
not something that someone just said, "Oh, let's have a pop-up cookout," right? They've spent a long time working on this, and now it's like, well, we're playing counterbalance to an egomaniac Alzheimer's patient.
well,
So,
And
I
and
think
did,
you may
did
be right, but like this morning was just bizarre, and the whole White House. It's the 250th, and it's just in a disarray.
mm,
It's just a mess.
UFC fighting in the White House, just the way the forefathers intended it to be.
right.
And you know what the thing? Do you notice it's a lot of the marketing and stuff? And I know they've only been there a year, and I think Karen brought up a good point. This is not something, but a lot of the sort of collateral, the marketing collateral stuff, it's all sort of like UFC kind of tacky, and I'm like the fonts. It's like it's like, and you go back to the 200th. It was we were on the Vietnam had just ended. We just got through Watergate. The country was not in a really a great, and it was stagflation was just getting going to the Carter
Right.
years, and Carter was that was the summer of the election, but it felt. I mean, the thinking back, I remember being in all these parades as a Cub Scout and all. A lot different than it does now, that's for sure. It's like, it felt like we were all coming together, and I think it was part of the national healing. And unfortunately, we're not at a healing point with this guy yet. So,
And I
but
think I think to, you know none of these presidents, whether it's you got LBJ, you got Nixon, you got a lot of people with a lot of flaws, that have historically been in the Oval Office, but the likes of this has never been seen. The likes, I mean, we've had a lot of presidents that have had issues. Have been, Johnson messed up. He started with the great, the social plans, and then Vietnam took the life out of him and different things, and Nixon, but nothing. Just think about the thing. Nixon was, got run out of Washington on a rail, and I don't even know if it was as divisive then as it is now. I mean, this is the likes of stuff no one's seen. I think historically, Andrew Jackson. Pick your dysfunctional president, and this is just a whole different flavor at level.
I think the things they were afraid of Nixon doing is exactly what Trump's doing. The things that where Nixon was running into the lines, that's where
Yeah,
he ran into trouble, but he never actually executed on as much he was talking about, and that was enough to basically get him removed from office. And hey, Karen, when you were in Europe, was the 250th anniversary even on the radar screen in Europe? Is it something? I mean,
No,
obviously, I wouldn't know if
no,
Denmark's 300th, 400th anniversary was coming. Yeah, and
no, they didn't
but it
mention
is
anything
it,
about that.
and it is the World Cup coming too, which I read today that there was a they've been talking about obviously not letting some of these like Iran. I think Iranian teams can actually stay in Mexico and come to the United States for their games. There was I guess, an Iraqi staff person who they turned away in Chicago.
I thought I heard there was
Again,
a player that wasn't going to come that was concerned too. I might be speaking out of line.
yep. But but you get to the point like, when FIFA goes to do this again, when the Olympics go to do this again, they're gonna have to say, well, geez, these guys, we don't know what these guys are. Most usually, like when China even had the Olympics, they really wanted to clean up their image for the Olympics. So this type of stuff was almost the opposite. They said that they were cleaning their streets up, moving people around. Here, we're actually almost trying to be the ugly American he thinks we are at the time we're bringing the world in over the next 2 years to these different events. So, like
We're
3 years ago.
excelling.
So,
That's just gross.
Yeah, and
yeah,
the Summer
yeah,
Olympics is it's just 28. It's not
yeah. So in 2 years
just
away.
around the corner. Yeah.
And our team looks really bad. I watched them at a friendly yesterday, which I thought was weird that we were playing a friendly with Germany on the anniversary of D-Day, but it was we did not look good. We did not look good. Yeah. And Germany definitely won that one. So, it was only 2-1, but our goal, I gotta say, our offense looked like kitty kick soccer. And Germany's only 10th best team in the country in the world, so it's they're not the standard, and we looked awful. So I don't think we're gonna have a big World Cup for the U.S. in this one. I think it'll be we're lucky we got in because we're the hosts. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, no,
we're
it's
not going to get out. We're
I
not
think
going to get out of pool play.
no, I would, and even our pool's lousy probably by design, but I
Yeah,
can't see us getting to the next round. It was it did we just I mean, again, you go back to the U.S. hockey team in 1980 getting beat up by Soviet Union and coming back, but it did not seem like we have much going on a week away from the tournament starting. So, and I'm not a soccer expert, but it was pretty easy to see. So, but
Yeah, I'm not
and I
either,
think
but
as
don't
we
don't our women's World Cup teams tend to have a far better record than the men's?
our women are awesome. They finally started to get paid for it too. Yeah,
yeah.
the men are
Shocker.
yeah.
That
Yeah.
you laid that up pretty easy on the social justice mindset.
Yeah.
The pay. There you go. The
Yeah.
pay
Yeah.
inequities between the women and the men's soccer is just atrocious.
And they
I
have
think
closed the
they've done
gap, I think,
some.
a little bit over the last few
Yeah,
years.
that's what I said.
Yeah.
They've done some things, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
but the
that
women are
that
the ones that have the records and
exactly.
to
No,
back it
exactly.
up and not the
Exactly.
paychecks.
and the thing that also is intriguing is that I think the fallback in the past was you don't fill the stadiums, but that women team it fills the stadium no matter
Hmm.
where they
Oh, yeah.
are their capacity, and you get to see a little bit of that now with the WNBA with the Caitlin
Yeah.
Clarks and Paige and all these guys coming in that are just it's a pretty entertaining brand of basketball.
I flew
Hmm.
through Indianapolis's airport last week, and it was Caitlin Clark was everywhere. It was
Yeah.
pretty fascinating. So yeah. No, it definitely is. It's not just a token sport anymore. I think women's sports are really exploding. We actually had a controversy in town. We had in Greenwich, I should say, not in town anymore, but I had worked with a person who started a flag football league, and it turned out to be the biggest flag football league in the country. And one of the things it was about kind of bringing kids together of all socioeconomic backgrounds. Having the police were a lot of the referees and stuff, so it was kind of a good mix. But it was he really made a big focus on the girls league, and this is about 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, when it really wasn't that much on the radar screen at that point. And now you got sort of these other grifter type people coming in, and they're trying to take away his what you call it, they're trying to take the women's away from him. When he was doing it before it was popular, he was doing it when he was trying to build something. And now I think but it's also kind of a strong statement that people see the money now in women's sports, which I think is a good thing. So
Yeah.
but yeah, and I think as we as you look at the especially with the NBA and with Trump being there, etc. You kind of got a little bit of feel a little bit for some of the players probably. I think the NBA tends to be of the sports the most progressive league coming into it, but feels like the Knicks owner Jim Dolan kind of forced this one on them. And
Yeah.
I think you get to this whole point of, again, very hard to obviously the NBA players are very handsomely paid, but you do get to this feeling of, plantation mentality that the owners are running the show and the players have to just, shut up and dribble, for lack of a better word, almost like gladiators. And it does kind of bring that whole point into, and to me, in this thing I was thinking about today with the flag in Stanford, with them not even, the McMahon's WWE not even understanding how to, raise and lower the flag. The whole Copper Kaepernick issue, Colin Kaepernick issue comes to mind, and I do think it's still something we have not even come close to reconciling with in terms of social inequities in sports,
Yeah.
and
And I've
especially in the
always,
NBA.
with Colin, I always, my conservative friends, I would say, well, isn't this kind of, the thing that the country actually stands for? That someone could demonstrate in a peaceful way, that someone could have the opportunity to kneel if they felt like they wanted to bring attention to a condition, and it seems to me the pushback, and obviously there's no doubt that he was blackballed and just run out of the NFL. It just seemed to
Mhm.
run contrary to everything that we're supposed to be standing up for. That those rights to express, and it was a peaceful, quiet manner. I mean, it wasn't aggressive or anything.
No, it was so quiet and it was so, I mean, I remember my kids being young and kind of them asking what this was about and, trying to explain to young kids about freedom of speech isn't free. It's challenging and you have to be able to listen to the voices that are also saying, but this country isn't the greatest. Um, you know, things are wrong. Things are not being handled right. People are not being treated right. It's not equal for everyone. Um, and not that everything is going to be equal, but I mean, we should make a far better attempt at fairness. When I worked with clinical day schools, we used to tell the kids, fair isn't equal because what you need and what someone else needs to get through math class may be different. Um, but as a country, drawing attention to the fact that we don't even try um, to make things fair and or equal, it's part of what is supposed to make the country great is the ability to have those discussions and those debates and hear from the people who don't think they're being treated fairly. Um,
Yeah, in a
It's the
respectful
more
manner.
perfect union concept,
Yeah,
right?
I always
We're
right.
wondered
never going to be
what
perfect, but we want to make it more perfect,
yeah,
and
what would
we're not doing it
folks
right now.
yeah, what would folks what should he have done differently? What the folks that complain, what should he have done
Well,
different? What would have been the solution? And the solution for the folks that disagreed was, well, just go along, just you know, don't do it.
Yeah, don't rock the boat.
and, and
Yeah,
and he had gotten the advice on it from a player, and I don't remember the player's name, but he had a player on the team who was a former soldier, a veteran,
yep,
and they had talked about what he could do. He didn't, because he had, I guess, I think he had sat on the bench for a game or two or
right.
something, and he was worried about that look, and he said, "What can I do?" And he said, so and again, the veterans, it was his judgment as much as anybody else, but he had said the kneeling he thought was a nice, was respectful or whatever. It's funny, I was at a Patriots game that week after it all happened, and and the Patriot and football fans in general tend to obviously be conservative. I think NFL fans especially. And the and you there was almost like a hasty riot, protest by the fans against Kaepernick, and kind of made me kind of look at things a whole different light. What kind of people we're associating with here when we do this, and it's become more obvious, I think, over the last almost 10 years now since that happened. What it is we're actually dealing with. So, but it is. I think it is an issue where, as we look, this being a very I think a fundamental month for social justice between Gay Pride Month and Gun Violence Awareness Month. June becomes, I think, a highlighted month, and it's again, I think we obviously don't have a White House being obviously in the rainbow colors like Obama used to, et cetera, and we feel like we're losing something. We're going backwards in all these areas.
Yeah, I think I mentioned last week a little bit about, or maybe not. I think it happened this week, but this is Pride Month, And the Governor Cox in Utah, he's kind of had an evolution in his career. And he was, back when he was a lieutenant governor, the mayor of Salt Lake was a gay woman, great mayor, and he really gave this talk about how his heart had been open, and he really, had a understanding and compassion and empathy for trans children, and just really, and it felt very authentic to me at the time. And so it's been what, 6 or 7 years, and now, and he declared Pride Month for, I want to say, about 4 or 5 years. Then I think last year he was just quiet, and left it kind of alone. And then this year, and again, I think he was following a model out of Arkansas, but declared this, Fidelity Month, and returning to those, the fundamental family, and whatever that means, and just was just to see the evolution of him. And then, again, I talked to you before, I mentioned, the One Kind Act and how they used his as a mouthpiece. And I talked to the director of that, and Curtis Ben, I think is his name. And just because I went there, I said, he's not really your best example of this. And this just kind of slammed it down for me, just saying, he's really not creating in a kind way anymore. So it's been really interesting to see his evolution, and just kind of really kowtowing to that extreme right mindset and thing. I think you've mentioned, just kind of how there's been a little bit of a decrease in the support for same-sex marriage.
Well, I think too, the hatred that has spilled out over the last, 10 years since the orange stain has been in Washington, it's opened the door for people who are more likely to just sit and stew quietly in their living rooms and, in their local watering holes. They're louder now. And I think, people who are more open-minded but live in red areas are probably a little more afraid of standing up and saying things and advocating when they don't have a horse in the game. So, I think it's now obviously the Gallup polls are anonymous and whatnot, but I think it's a tough place to be in if you aren't used to standing up for something, and not to defend, people who don't stand up exactly, but I think that, you have to have some level of understanding and compassion for the fact that it's not easy to be the minority voice, whatever that minority is. And though the loud, angry voices are often associated with violence. And so, when you might have jumped into what you thought was a verbal argument, but now you're worried somebody's packing a gun or somebody's unhinged and they're going to come at you. I know as a woman, that's something that's, constantly on your mind. I cannot physically win in a fight against someone bigger than me or a male. So I think that, there's a couple of different possibilities to what appears to be waning support for same-sex marriage, LGBTQ rights. I think it is there. I think it's just harder to be a loud and proud ally when you're not surrounded by other people.
Yeah. It's been interesting. I'm off topic, so bear with me, guys, because this is a Utah topic, because obviously Salt Lake City is the center for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But interesting, this week, the Pentagon, relative to the different faiths and the help me out and lose my mind. Who's the ministers in the armed forces, Greg? The chaplains, excuse me. Yep. So they categorized all the different denominations, and they didn't include the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as a Christian denomination. And the two senators, Lee being our buddy, and Curtis. And there was a lot of talk about, hey guys, the evangelicals are not your friends, and they're unchanged and way over here. And it was just intriguing for me to watch the local community and the predominant faith out here. Gee, we're on the outs here a little bit. What's going on? And they're what, 70, 75, maybe 80%, depending on the location, Trump supporters. But, that was an intriguing piece. And going back to Karin, how do we deal with, how do they deal with being on the outside, looking in, and what type of voices? Because I always have to think twice, living in the community that I live in, about what I post or how I present things. And I just think, Karin, you nailed it. It's with President Trump, and I want to give Karin the star for the most the most different ways to describe and allude to Trump. You are the champion. I always look forward to what type of way you're going to describe him. But I think what you said is 100% true. It empowered people that were quiet, maybe sitting back, and I think it also gave many of us a false sense of security that maybe we've turned a corner, and then we woke up and realized, nah, not even close. We haven't turned any corners.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it was.
No,
I think it was definitely a wake up call for me in 16, this first go round of insanity, where starting to hear people and starting to see, I think it's the Southern Poverty Law Center popping up its map on where different kind of hate groups were, and I was just shocked. I'm like, what do you mean the neo-Nazis are not just in Alabama? What do you mean, all of the KKK is actually alive? And, by having someone who was speaking their language of hatred, they felt comfortable to come out of the woodwork again. And, it was a wake-up call for me, for sure, that we weren't as progressed as I thought we were. And I think that is something that, folks in my age range and maybe even younger are kind of realizing, particularly if you're part of a racial minority or LGBTQ or, any of the kind of others. We're not as far along as we were told we were prior to 2016.
And I think, again, I think it's about trajectory too, right? We were moving in the right direction. I think slowly, not quite ever going to get there, but I think now it's clear we're in a regressive mode. Sorry about that. I mean, I did let the dog in the room before she started barking. Sorry about that. But I think, Karin, this is where I think a lot of my and I think Paul probably speaks to this too. A lot of our advocacy comes from is, as straight white men, I think we become, have the potential, and again, not to overrate ourselves, but because these people who are marginalized, etc., I think there is an issue. One of the things that popped up to me, getting back to the gun rights, that I was talking to somebody about how, I'm really, if somebody wants to pull a gun on me, I'm going to be big, tough, veteran guy. And somebody said, yeah, but my wife is in a dark parking lot. She needs to carry something. And it kind of makes you feel like, okay, it's not all about me, but I think that it's um I do think we have to be compassionate that um just because some people can't self-advocate or almost, in a kind of a quasi hostage situation where they're in, that we have to be makes it more important that we get out there and be part of the solution, hopefully, and be part of what
Relative
can
to
be a force multiplier.
relative to the gun issues, what are the two, some of the two basic things? We say, first of all, we say, background checks. We're not saying anyone can't own a gun, and we're saying, what purpose does an AR? And when you talk about the very example you mentioned, that's why this kind of came to mind. Self-defense and AR is not, it's useless. It doesn't serve a purpose. So I don't see any of the discussions circling around even the example you use. It's about, hey, let's get a background check for folks, make sure, folks that need assistance do and don't necessarily, and quite frankly, we know what the statistics are on suicide, and that happens when guns are owned by the folks that maybe need some help. And then, during Clinton, the ARs were gone, and it had a significant impact on the number of deaths. And so what people are looking at, what is presented, is a very, very reasonable, measured approach. And that's where, I'm curious what both of you have to say about that as we go into the midterms and as you look to 28. Is I think the Republican kicks our butts. They're very extreme and very laser focused, and sometimes the Democrats, again, we've talked about this like a couple times now. We kick each other down. We beat up each other, and we're not as laser focused sometimes on what we need to do. I think it's been kicked around. I'm really going off topic here, but increasing the size of the court. And that Biden said no way and stuff, but I think the GOP definitely does kick our butts about getting 4 or 5 talking points, and they're just like a dog on a bone. They just hang on them, and we're kind of divided up because we have that more real progressive, and that's happening with the election for us for the new District 1 in Utah, and then the more left centered. But the gun thing is very, very reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, I think the talking points that the GOP has also are fear-based.
Absolutely.
And that's something that I don't think it's hard to sell tolerance and kindness and love, because it means everybody gets similar things. They all get enough to live on. They all get enough to pay their bills and feed their kids and those kind of things. And that doesn't put anyone above anybody else. But if you're pointing fingers and saying that person, that group is to blame for why you don't have enough, you don't have, the big house and the cars and all that stuff, that's a lot easier to sell, especially to people who are, that MAGA base. They're not economically advantaged. They are not educationally enriched. They are the ones who are looking at everything and saying, wow, I wish I had this, that, and the other thing. They want to be the Elon Musks, at least checking account wise. And that's just, it's such an easier sell, and it's just so sad.
I always think of the conservatives as the sort of the character in John Mellencamp's song "Little Pink Houses." They're sitting and they think they've got it so good. And it's actually Paul and I, Karen. I don't know if you've ever read the People's History of the United States. Paul, I know, is finished. He probably finished it at this point. I've read it a couple times, but one of the overarching themes is it's always been class warfare. Even our race warfare is class warfare in the United States. And they just let enough people into the tent to get an electoral majority, but no more. So it's not about upward mobility and an American dream in this country. It's about how many people do we have to make happy in order to get the Elon Musk elected. And I thought to me, that was a real interesting perspective on American history in terms of how we've let people into the tent.
Yeah, and you're right. In the book, what's intriguing is the book is old. I mean, it was published in 80.
Yeah.
So everything he said is just it's probably 10 times the significant when he talked about the wealth and the top whatever percent it is that control the wealth. I can't remember now because it's more extreme now.
Oh, yeah.
And then
the numbers are stale at this point that were in the book. Yeah, it's much more extreme.
And Karin mentioned, but they blame the wrong people for the inequity in the wealth. It's not the immigrant that's taking your job away. That's your problem.
Well, it's like that cartoon.
It's your CEO or CFO that is making just an astronomical amount of money and hoarding
plus bonuses and not paying taxes.
And options.
I mean, I haven't read the book you guys are referencing, but to me, it goes back to A Bug's Life from Pixar.
Actually, now that's a better reference than the book.
Cut to the chase.
I'm always good for a Disney Pixar reference, but again, if you keep people in fear and you don't let them realize that they mathematically outnumber the bullies, we're scrambling, right? The people are scrambling and trying to protect ourselves from an invisible enemy, and we're not focusing, we're not organizing, we're not paying attention enough to what's been going on, because I don't know, one of you said it earlier, and this isn't new. This was set up, I mean, with Nixon, possibly even before. I read Heather Cox Richardson, daily, and she gives a great, thumbnail of history and where this all came from. And yeah, I mean, this has been in the works for a while. Reagan and his welfare queens and all of this, stuff is. But yeah, I always flash to A Bug's Life and that little speech at the end where it's like, well, wait a minute, we outnumber you.
Yeah, yeah.
No, definitely.
So, just in the spirit of the inequity economically, let's pivot to the cost of the tickets tomorrow night.
So the Knicks, yeah.
Yeah, I think what the lowest one is 10 grand.
Yeah, Karen, I don't know if you've seen this. It's literally like some of the tickets are going on the floor for hundreds of thousands of dollars for the
My
game
kids
tonight.
were showing me, yes, my kids were showing me the ticket prices.
Yeah,
and I was
crazy.
like, that's fine for like the Jack Nicholsons and the Timothy Chalamets that have this money. Fine, do what you want with it. But who in their right mind could afford that or is borrowing against charging it on their whatever?
There's somebody maxing out their credit card this weekend.
That's insane. But I mean, again, this is a championship game, but it also goes back to things like concert tickets, which have gone astronomical. There are probably hundreds of artists I would love to go see, but at the cost of even a nosebleed seat, assuming it's even in the area where I can drive to, no thanks. It's not.
You're exactly right. Now the Springsteen tickets jumped. It was $100 forever for a ticket, and now it's $495. And then of course they come down as the city. So now I'm just waiting it out because they come down. But no, you're 100% right. I think the ticket inequity is and it's going to be interesting because I think there's a real feeling tomorrow night that Trump is going to get booed out of the stadium. I think people are overestimating the crowd that's going to be in there because it's not going to be the rank and file basketball fan. It's going to be the people who care more about their tax rate than our democracy kind of people, I think, who can afford these seats.
Unless the Spike Lees and those guys come.
No, there'll be a few of those, yeah.
Spike, Spike can demand the whole freaking garden. I mean, he's more of an icon than Trump is.
Yeah.
No, in New York.
Definitely.
That's
especially
not
when it
hard
comes to New York
do.
basketball. Yeah.
Well, that's touche right
there.
Yeah. I'll throw you those softballs and you can hit them out.
Thanks. I need one now and then. Okay.
I thought what you brought up before, Paul, about the Supreme Court, and I think Biden was, as we kind of came out of the first Trump, and again, I think his nature was to be obviously a centrist. I do think this time, I think it's going to be a price of admission to the Democratic primary. Some of these more what we would consider extreme positions, but there's strong argument to be made why the court should be. There's 13 district courts now. That's how the 9 came about.
Yeah.
But I think that issue is where we kind of run into this, and again, having been a Republican, having understand maybe, and again, a lot of people understand the way they do things, but I think they worry about winning elections first, and then the policies will take care of themselves. I think Democrats, we get into purity tests, we get into the let's move the goalpost a few more yards to see if we can get there, and I think that's where that's what we found it in 2020, I think, because we wanted to beat Trump so bad. And that's the gear we're gonna have to find. I think all this stuff can happen, and I think it is gonna happen. But I think I just worry about what this primary is gonna become if we start to treat if we have all this punch list of areas you can't go or have to go, otherwise you can't get the nomination. I think that's a little bit into this.
We're going through this here in Utah, this District 1, but you see it nationwide. What's AOC going to do? Is she going to be on somebody's ticket and those type? But I think, and Janine and I have talked about this, about who we're going to vote for in the Democratic primary. That's right now. We do in the red state of Utah vote by mail, even though they you have to opt in the future. By 28, I think you have to opt in. But so we can have our ballots sitting on the table. It's actually great. You get time to look at it and talk about it and really be thoughtful. But I have finally just said I'm all progressive. We've got to go all in and get after it. We got to. I want it before I die. See universal health care. I want all these things. It's not extreme anymore. It's like Karin nailed it. It's what's best for our kids can't survive. And I'm hopeful that as our children move into this foray, that even though there is some gain with the Republican with young males, even though they vote against, I'm hoping we can see a change in what attracts folks to these. What I think Karin nailed it. A kindness policy. What do we do for all of us rather than just I think it's I'm hopeful, but I was a little bit more center right, but I'm like, okay, I'm all in. Let's go for this.
I think the Democrats too, and I didn't make a study of Biden, but another old cis heterosexual white guy who I think had a lot of obviously history in politics, but a lot of faith in the system and in the traditions of what we did. And a gap I think that that older generation has is to resist the change, resist what's new, because historically what's been happening has sort of worked, at least enough, right? Until things really broke, I'd say in the last 2 years. It was starting to crumble in 16 through 2020, but really falling apart like the East Wing.
Yeah.
Which isn't to say it fell apart. It was systematically disassembled by a madman. But I think that there is
madman. There's another one. Good job, Karin.
I'm trying not to curse. But I do, I think that there's a faith and in tradition, and we cling to it, in all kinds of areas. But I think in politics, there's this idea that people who went into politics, when they swore with their hand on a Bible to, defend the Constitution, we all believed them. And then these people started coming in, and it's like, but wait, they didn't. You mean they lied to us? And it's like, yeah, they did. Like, we need to now step up our game to combat the fact that people aren't just going to tell the truth because their hands on the book of religion of their choice, right? Like, we need, I'm not saying Democrats need to fight dirty, but they need to fight. And I think that's been one of the most disheartening things, is that could this have been stopped before now if the Democratic playmakers had done something more, had pushed more, had challenged more, had not just rested on the fact, well, it'll figure itself out. The ultimate game of pass the buck. Well, it's going to fail here. It's going to fail here. We'll let someone else handle it. They'll be the ones to do the calling out. No, grow a set and do it yourself. This is what your actual job is.
Yeah.
I think the Democrats missed what was happening in 2016. We missed that we were in I would call it like a populist moment where people were, they're probably fed up today, but it was when the Fed and up this first emerged, and we didn't meet the challenge. And again, I was, I guess I worked pretty hard in both campaigns against Bernie, but frankly, if you look back at it, it's probably the moment that we could grab the mantle on this populism that we didn't grab the mantle in 2016.
Well, I think we
lost control of it at that point. Yeah.
We all said when he entered the race, well, that'll never happen.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. It's going to stop. It's going to stop at the primary. It's going to, and it didn't stop.
No.
And we all were like, well, wait. And then, we found out Russia interfered on his behalf. What? He cheated? No way. The man who cheated on every significant relationship he ever had? No way.
And that was Obama doing exactly what you described about Biden. Obama trusted the process and felt he had to get, the Gang of Eight on board before he can go forward with talking about the Russian thing, because he didn't want to look like he was putting his hand on the scale. If Trump had that kind of information, would he care? No, he would just go out and blast it away. And that's
social media. It'd be posted on his social network within moments.
Oh yeah.
Actually, I stand corrected, because it doesn't have to be accurate for him to post it. So
people are saying.
The second piece, going back to what you said, back to that 2016, because I ran for I told this before, I ran for the legislature, and I was downtown with all the Democrats in Utah, and everyone thought it was going to be historical and everything. And, but the next thing we pivoted to is that, okay, this was just his campaign. It was rhetoric, and he was off the rails for the campaign. Yeah. But when he came into office, the norms would realign and he would go with it. And and he had enough people in the cabinet and stuff. It was still horrific, but at least kept the rails on. Now there's nothing.
Yeah, I think
That was
until
the second mistake we thought. We thought it was going to pivot back to the norms. The Obamas talk about awkward moments. Try to welcome into the White House and have and Michelle had a gift, and they tried to make it like normal. But boy, you listen to his inauguration speech in 2017, and it's like, okay, nothing's normal. But that was the second time, so we didn't get the right motion in the campaign, and then we thought, well, it'll settle down, and the norms will be embraced. And nope.
And again, I think what we probably missed the calculus on too was that so many of the traditional Republican voter, the suburban, moderate, is when you traditionally would be a Republican voter, went to the Democratic side, that they can't lose the MAGA vote now. If they turn on the MAGA vote, they don't have a governing coalition to win any election. So now these Republicans, even the moderates, are putting a rock in a hard place because they've lost their traditional base, and they've got this new kind of Frankenstein base they got to deal with, and they can't afford. They just won't have a governing coalition if they turn on that base that is beholden to Trump, basically, right? So. That's why the most courageous ones are the ones that are leaving office. Once they got primaried, they're leaving office. Then you can become courageous, but until then, not so much.
I'll push back on that a little bit. They should push back a little bit more while they were in office. I mean,
no, they should, but I think it's still they know their career's over.
Right.
But to me, it's like if you were a senator, especially a senator, or even a congressman, you're never going to not have food on the table. You're always going to have something to do in your life. Right. So I don't subscribe to people who are willing to sell out. To me, it's not to overrate it, but I think it's selling out your morality. I mean, selling out your, to me, this is going to be the, whatever you believe in religion is going to be the first question you're going to be asked. What did you do at this moment? And obviously they're playing their cards, as we talked about earlier. They're not very Christian. They're not very whatever their religion is, because all they're worried about is how can I get reelected and do a little more grifting versus what's good for their people they're supposed to be representing,
Well, not to go back to a nice circle back there to, I think it was Paul brought up that, in Utah, they're trying to edge away slowly from Pride Month to, what was it? Fidelity Month. When all that hits the news is these conservative, often Republican MAGA men cheating on their wives, getting arrested for child sex abuse. How many of them are in the Epstein files? Still haven't touched those yet. Multiple wives and girlfriends at the same time, multiple kids from different women. If that's not an argument for fidelity, I don't know what is. The irony is just, it's mind baffling. Like, I don't understand the cognitive dissonance that these people have to do, the big thick walls that have to exist in their brains for them to actually stand there with a straight face and just try to say that, it's the gay people that are morally bankrupt. Like, no.
Cognitive dissonance is a great word for this moment, because we're way past hypocrisy now. We're into having to deny it, right? So no, I agree. No, it is a I think it's a one of the things I think it's crazy. I always thought it was crazy how the Republicans accuse everybody of being a pedophile. And it's like, I mean, I might be naive, maybe hopefully naive. I don't think there's that many pedophiles out there, but then you look at the Republican Party and how many of them get into these issues. You're like, well, maybe in their world, they know a lot more pedophiles than we know, because they seem to have a much higher percentage than the rest of the world.
I tend to think there's skeletons in a lot of people, cross parties and everything. But I think the thing that Karin highlights that's so significant is the reflection. So, the gay couple, the immigrant, I just chuckle. I don't know, chuckle, maybe cry. I can't decide which one. But like, for instance, last week I was doing my exercise on the treadmill at the gym, and, Fox News is one of the channels that's up there. And so I just see it, and they say, someone committed a crime. I can't remember what it was. It might have been a murder. And then, and all of a sudden it was an undocumented person. I said, well, that's unfortunate, but them being an undocumented person has nothing to do with this crime. As you know, if you look at it statistically, undocumented people are much more law-abiding than legal citizens and stuff. But that becomes that boogeyman piece. You know, if you're transgender, you're a pedophile, or these type of things, and that statistically doesn't play out. Now, statistically, you know, there's folks that have issues on both sides of the aisle and those type of things, but those boogeymen that they point to, it doesn't hold water, but that becomes the narrative.
I mean, I think if you haven't personally been touched by, that was the wrong phrase, but touched by the trauma of childhood sexual abuse, whether it's a serial pedophile or kid to kid offending, you're very lucky. Because as a social worker, I can tell you it's
absolutely
enormously prevalent. You know, if you get into a room with 6 women and you ask all of them if they've ever had an experience where they were pressured or coerced as a child, teenager, young adult, probably 5 out of 6 of them will tell you yes, they have at least once. So I mean, you know, the serial pedophiles, literal adults preying on children, I think is probably rarer. But people who have been molested, we're talking about massive numbers. So, you know, I think, but again, I think it's a boogeyman thing, right? It's not talked about enough. It's not given a lot of airtime. It's not certainly not enough money for treatment or resources or things like that. So again, we'll go back to the boogeyman thing of, well, it's the trans person that's going to molest your daughter in the restroom when you weren't worried about the male pedophile in the men's room with your son to begin with. So,
well, I was at a workshop. Now, this got to be 20 years ago, so. And they asked that question. So this was all educators, right? And you're right. That 5 out of 6 was about right. And just basically asked the question, just the way you worded it for everybody in there, little piece of paper, pop. And they said they did it at every place they went in the country. And straight up, that was about the percentage. That 5 out of 6 was very, you know, that everybody, you know, had a different type of, you know, situation where they were exposed to that or abused and these type of things. So that's it's a
and I think the numbers might be close to that if you asked men too. I think men are
this was men and women.
Right. Even in a secret straw poll, men are still much less likely to admit that they've been the victims of any kind of sexual.
You know, the manly thing. I wasn't, you know, protecting.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely societal pressures to, you know, if I as a man admit that I was ever molested or touched or coerced, it makes me less of a man. It might make me gay. It might make me, you know, seem weak or whatever. There was an article I read this week, and I can't remember where it was, but they did a poll and they were asking, I think it was thousands of men and women, and they asked men, what was the worst thing a woman could do to you? And they said, embarrass me. And they asked women, what's the worst thing a man could do to you? And they said, kill me. And again, the difference in perception of what is the worst thing by gender is just, wow, we really are not doing a great job on educating our men, our males, on, you know, self-awareness and self-esteem and communication and all of these things. And it just being embarrassed. I mean, God, most of us are embarrassed. I'm embarrassed on a daily basis, and usually because I say something stupid myself, right? Not someone else embarrassing me, but, you know, yeah, it stings, it hurts, you get over it. But just
look at, and now you bring up such a great, and now you pivot to who the leader of the free world is. And I have said this a number of times. 2 situations resonate with me, particularly as a principal in schools, right? I said, we work endlessly to try to teach children to not behave the same way that this man behaves 24/7. Not belittle, not bully, you know, no harassment, no stuff. We have Title IX invested, all these things, right? That's what we invested in. But he gets to do it 24/7. There's no excuse for it. And I always say, if I was to behave like Trump does for one day, I'd be fired the next day.
Mhm.
And so there's this
You'd
he
probably
gets
be
a pass
arrested.
on the very things that you're talking about, Karen.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's also, I mean, aside from the obvious Alzheimer, dementia, whatever the specific diagnosis is, you're also talking about a person who had never been held accountable for any of his actions,
Yeah.
who's never been taught responsibility and humility. And I mean, because there are people who have come from money, right, who understand basic human empathy, um, and can take some level of responsibility for their actions. And you see it over and over again with his behavior, how he acts. Anyone questions him, and it's a full blown toddler temper tantrum, right? And we've all
Yeah.
lived through the terrible threes with our kids. And let me tell you, there's no age worse, unless it's past 23. But I'm telling you, I don't think there's an age worse than 3 years old. Um, but it reminds me of, like, I worked in clinical day schools with kids who just had no frustration tolerance, no impulse control. And I remember thinking, boy, when I have kids, you can control, there's a lot you can't control, but the things you can control in terms of teaching them how to behave like good human beings, I'm gonna work hard on that. And the rest of life will life the way it's gonna. But he just demonstrates over and over again the argument for good, solid parenting, because I don't think you would have this kind of an individual um, behaving as much as he is if he had ever been taught responsibility or accountability.
Yeah, and that book Lucky Loser by Suzanne Craig, she goes into, he was really a bully almost from the word go, and that was his MO. And just he was always a bigger kid, and there was a lot around his the family situation. His mother had was sick at some tough pregnancies, and about how the lack of discipline in the house. And obviously, Fred was not a loving father by any means, and it was the Fred the father. But it is a lifelong thing. From to your point, he never was taught any discipline as a child from the way the book reads.
No.
And he never was told, and basically never told no. A rich kid who was never told no, and just continued to think he could master the world.
And
And there's
coming
so
back,
many,
go ahead, Karen.
I was going to say, there's so many other nuances to that too, because there's plenty of people who have terrible
Oh, sure.
fathers,
Yeah,
terrible mothers,
yeah,
don't have parents at all, live
yeah.
through horrific abuse and neglect. And they're not like this.
No.
You know, as much as I enjoy Criminal Minds, there's not that many serial killers out there,
Mhm.
right? So, like,
And I
I don't
and
know.
I and I pivot that, there's some folks that are great parents that their kids struggle. But the piece that I would probably want to wrap it up with a little bit, Greg, is it still goes back to 2016, which we've kind of alluded to now, and then again, right, in 24, is we all saw these behaviors, yet there was enough people in our country to vote for someone down. Yeah, I mentioned this at too many times probably already, but the minute he talked about grabbing someone's genitalia, the minute that he belittled a reporter with cerebral palsy, these type of things, the race should have been over,
Hmm.
and we need to reflect on our as a country and as a community our moral fiber about, okay, what are we going to support? So it's one thing to be the bully, it's another thing to win a national election as a bully, demonstrating these behaviors constantly, and then constantly being given a pass and support for the behavior. That's actually, I've always said this to my associates and stuff and families. Trump's behaviors don't bother me nearly as much as people voting for him.
And I
Yeah.
think it's become such a I think we're just as a population we're such transactional people. It's I don't think when we in 1976 when we were at the 200th anniversary of the country, I don't think people were struggling. It was a tough time economically.
Yeah.
People are always going to need enough to survive, but it's become such a race for things now, and everyone is, I think, the measure of happiness is so tied in. People think to financially, and again, not there's a lot of people who need are in this country who need for the necessities, but I think there was a connection both times with hey, this guy's rich, he can make me rich. When if you really understand how he got his money, he ain't gonna get any of the rest of us rich. It's not gonna happen.
Mhm.
And I think that that connection to it's all about money has really been, I think, is the real problem in this country, and I think is the real risk to this country going forward. Is that it's so selfish and so what's in it for me that we're willing to elect somebody like him they think is going to get them ahead financially at the cost of almost everything else.
Yeah.
And it couldn't be further from the truth right now.
No,
Yeah,
definitely.
exactly.
Anyway, guys, well, I really appreciate having you back, Karen. I think great insight into a lot of these things, especially in your background. And you're always welcome. Really appreciate it, Paul. We'll have next week. I think one way or another, this thing's over by the time we talk next Sunday. I think it's over Wednesday night, but we'll talk more about that. But thank you both, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Take care.